everyone, it's Gav here with Wolf Financial. So excited to be able to put an amazing opportunity in front of you. We are working together with Prospero to bring this raise to the masses. What you're about to watch is a full interview that we did with their founder. Prospero, if you're unfamiliar, uses AI signals to consistently outperform the market year over year. There's a free app and so much more that is coming with this raise. So go ahead and give it a watch and comment below any questions you have, and we'll make sure to get back to you on them.
We got George up here now. We can get deep diving. What's up, George?
How you doing?
Doing great, my man. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's these looks like we're taking a bit of a bear turn, but as we're both in the same place sometimes sometimes a correction's good, especially if your portfolio's in the right place.
Agreed. And I will say, us day traders on a day like this, we love to look at that VIX and say, dang, okay, it dropped a little bit more, but it was at 18 and a half, it hit like 19 and a half almost today. We just love to see that, even if it doesn't last for too long. You know what I mean? Even if it's just a little bit, maybe it's here for a week or so, and we get that week of just big volatility, big opportunity. I think something we love. So I know most people aren't really hating the dip. Something we're trying to take advantage of and trade, and any names that we're really liking that maybe you're in spots that we want to add to, maybe doing that. But for me personally, I'm not really doing that on the longer term side of things. I definitely still think there's more potential for downside for this market if it wants it. But yeah, a fun day, a fun way to start off the week too, into the short week and off the long weekend. Just a crazy day back and forth with all the volatility, and I think definitely, depending on the type of trader you are, some decent opportunity. Were there any specific signals you saw from Prospero that maybe killed it today, or that you're looking at for maybe tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we're getting more clarity on just like the high level, QQQ, SPY, net option sentiment. Had I listened a little more to it on Friday, I think we would have been in a better position today. Um, but we were kind of looking at it like on Friday. Sorry, on Thursday we saw QQQ net option sentiment kind of shoot up into the 30s, which is higher than it's been for a while. So we added more risk. Probably overreacted to that. So then when we saw it shoot down to zero, we were like, well, we don't want to flip the complete other way and then have it turn around for a second day in a row. But no, we got more clarity today. I think we're set up well, more short than long. I think that, unless there's some news, new news tomorrow. I think any kind of clarity, I think there needs to be more clarity on, what's happening with, tariffs. Not because I think they'll necessarily get repealed by the Supreme Court, but the market hates uncertainty, and I think we're going to have a little uncertainty around that for a little bit. So I think unless we have a positive news event, I do expect this kind of downturn to continue, and hopefully we got the right names to capitalize on that, and we've flipped sufficiently short. But yeah, I think from a high level, we're seeing some very bearish QQQ, SPY, and option sentiment more than we've seen in a while. So we want to make sure we're in a position to capitalize on that.
Love it, George. Yeah, always love the market thoughts from you, because I know you're constantly watching the charts, constantly updating things on Prospero, and just trying to give people the best experience. So great stuff there. I definitely want to, let's deep dive into the crowdfund, of course, because I know that's the main topic of conversation here for the people that maybe just joined. We are talking about Prospero AI crowdfund. You guys are now able to actually own equity in Prospero, which I know a ton of you guys in the audience are constantly using Prospero every single day, and I know many of those people that are using the signals would love to have some alerts getting sent to them for some of the best trades that might be happening that day. And that's what we got going here, right, George? Do you want to give a little background to that? Maybe just backstory into what you get with all that, and then we can deep dive a little bit more into everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I think, you know, first of all, it's a good time, for some people that might be hearing about this crowdfund, multiple times. This week is a key week because we're actually, as we've mentioned before, and I'll mention again, the only first access to our alerts product is going to be to people that have, put money into the crowdfund. So in terms of that, like this week is the first week we're sort of going to be collecting emails to get people in that. So after there's that cutoff, it's probably at least another few weeks before we take another batch into the alert. So if you're anxious to try the alerts as they're rolled off the assembly line within the next, got to get into the crowd fund, as an investor in the next few days if you want to be in that first batch. And yeah, like the alerts product is going to be our easiest product to follow. It's got a lot of new tech in it. We've integrated more kind of like live and historic LLM data to train beyond our signals, add more market context. So I think that's a really cool part of it. And yeah, there's going to be one, alert today, our best idea. Also whether that's a bull or a bear pick will kind of be indicative of like what we're seeing in the market, what like our latest tech is seeing in the market. So yeah, I mean, I think it's I'm excited. We've been working on these alerts for a long time, and it's finally time for them to be coming off the assembly lines. So that's pretty exciting. And then yeah, at a high level, we're kind of in an exciting period of growth. I shared like some really cool numbers on the page. In terms of an update on our monthly actives. Our monthly actives, in going back to I think 5 months ago, were 5.5K in the app. As we launched the crowdfund, they were up to 12K. And then, that was in June. In July, we hit 13,900. And, in August, we were at 13,800. But we stopped really funneling anyone to the app and we started funneling them to the crowdfund instead. But what's really cool about that is we were at 13.9 in July, and 6,670 new users. But we're at 13.8 in August, and that's out of 5,370 new users. So we actually increased our returning users. It was basically 7,200 to 8,400. So we're seeing the new users that come are, even stickier. So even though we had a lower total number this month, we actually had, because there were less new users coming in because we were funneling people to the crowdfund instead of the website. I think that's some pretty exciting news in terms of the stickiness. So that's what's like the latest and greatest in terms of the alerts, in terms of the traction that we're seeing like around this expanded campaign that we're doing on X, that has been going super well. And then in terms of like high level, what we are, what we're about for people that don't know that yet. This is a quick review. I started my career on the buy side of the stock market. I actually taught myself accounting at 17 to work at my first hedge fund. And a lot of what the Prospero product is fixing a lot of problems that I saw, even with disadvantages I thought working at a small hedge fund, even first one of the larger guys. And some holes that I saw in value investing, where I thought a lot of the options flow that we focus on would be really helpful to keep people on the right side of trades, not on basically the wrong side, betting against institutions. And that philosophy has turned out to work really well. Our newsletter picks the last 4 years on average are beating the SPY by about 67%. And this year, we're about, live numbers about 60. So we're very consistent. We're right in that average, on a tough, volatile year. Actually, what's interesting about this year is our shorts are about 140% above the market on an annualized basis. And our longs are about 40% above the market on our annualized basis. So even in an overall bull year, we've been using the signals, especially those SPY, QQQ unit option sentiment signals that I, started out quoting. We've been using them really well to time the market, help other people time the market. So yeah, it's an exciting time for us. It's a growth period. Alerts are kind of our flagship product. We think there's going to be some really good monetization around it. We just reran our numbers, and we actually think with this rollout, with the rollout of a few of our other products, our web app, our Discord, and some of the LLM stuff, we think we want to roll out in terms of interaction points, guiding our signals. So new products that we think we can roll out in 2026. We think we can do 1.5 million in revenue next year based on some of these new numbers, some of these growth numbers that we just integrated into our model. So yeah, really, really good time to I'd say get in, start using Prospero's products as part of the crowdfund, and then also a really exciting time with this marketing growth in terms of I think the value you can get the company at relative to where we're going to be at next year.
Those are some great thoughts, George. And I want to remind everybody in the audience, there's that link that I put in the top of the spaces. You should be able to scroll to the very top and see all the posts that we put up there. The most recent one should say invest and own equity in Prospero and in Prospero AI. You guys can just go directly to that website. I have it up in front of me. So much information on here. You guys can probably, I know a lot of people probably have a ton of questions, which George, I know you're very open for people getting in contact with you and getting their questions answered. But I just wanted to throw it out there that this website has really pretty much everything you need to make a decision for what you're looking at here. So just wanted to remind you guys of that. And also, one of the like most minimum amount like investments I've ever seen in the private area, a $250 minimum investment here, guys. I know George, for the signal specifically, it's a $300 minimum. So keep that in mind in the audience if you want those alerts specifically. But it's crazy just to own equity in the company. It's a minimum of 250 bucks. I don't know if any of you guys in the audience have ever been in the private investing world, but this is pocket change for those guys. I mean, those guys for those investments most of the time it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And so the fact that we have the chance to get in at such a low barrier to entry is really just something I think the audience should think about, especially if you guys are using the app. And this seems like something that would be up your alley for opportunity wise. But it's crazy. 58 days left to invest. I know the last spaces we did, George, we were at. I think you guys were at 153,000 or 157 or something like that. Right now, you guys are at $193,847 total raised, almost hitting that 200K. So just love to see the growth since the last spaces. I think we did that maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that. So just love to see the growth. Did you have anything you wanted to say about that growth there? Did that surprise you? I'm just curious on your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean it's great. We love to see the people joining. We love to the people that join at these spaces. I love to do that and kind of see who comes in after. What we can add. People are always emailing me, and I always say happy to answer questions directly. George at prospero.ai. Um, but yeah, I mean we wanted to set kind of a low minimum because a big thing that we're trying to do here is just make this stuff a lot more accessible. And as we grow, and as we roll out more products, and as we get the word out about us more, we really want as many people as possible to be like, hey, I don't just use this product. I'm an owner of equity in it. And Prospero practices what they preach. They're not just saying they want to level the playing field. They're not just saying they want to create an accessible product. They're actually showing that with the way they're raising capital. Like what I always say about like our journey here is me and my co-founders have put money in to found it. We've bootstrapped it. We've given a lot of people equity, sweat equity to do it, because it's been important to us to have a free product, and it will continue to be important to us to have a free based product. Obviously we're expanding some of the paid features because as investors, you want to see us do that too. And we really want to strike a balance between making sure we monetize things properly, but also making sure it's accessible. And what I really always tell people about this and our long-term plans, as it's been like a common question of interest. Longer term, we do want to be an asset manager. We do want to have ETFs, mutual funds, maybe smart portfolios that we can do in partnership with some large platforms that some of which you might have heard of. But what we see as a big difference in terms of these asset management companies is, we got asked this question, and I think it's a really good one to look at check out our reviews on the Republic page, check out our answers on the Republic page. I think there's some really good ways to get to know, what we're doing. But one of them, we were asked a question. There's another company on the crowdfund um, called Pave Finance, and we were asked what's different about that. And we were about them, and we were kind of like, well, that's easy, right? Pay finance is in, they're doing some interesting things with personalizing in wealth management. But at the same time, these wealth managers pay between 500 and $1,500 in customer acquisition cost. And Wealthfront Betterment, those robo advisors specifically paid about $1,000 per their early user. And we're acquiring users, into our funnel at about $1.50 a user, right? So we have a very clear roadmap of how we want to differentiate. We want to make this accessible product. We want to let people get to know it. We want to let people see how the signals work, see how we use them in our process for two reasons. One, so we can continue to get people into our funnel, very cheaply relative to those expensive customer acquisition costs. And then, obviously be able to, pitch them on these, wealth management services as we roll them out. But also, we think we're making the conversion easier. When someone's seen our signal, seen our newsletter, for years, we've been doing the newsletter for 4 years. By the time we roll out, these products, we want people to be able to say, no, I don't think I know what I'm getting here when I pick a Prospero ETF. I get their process. I know their signals work. So not only do we think we're setting ourselves up better in this customer acquisition, in terms of the pricing, we actually think it'll be easier for us than a lot of these other places to get a conversion because, if you're fed an ad for, I'm not trying to pick on paid finance, but I'm just extending it. If you're fed an ad for paid finance and you're just like, well, how do I know this difference between this and my current asset management strategy or ETF or whatever? They're just an ad at that point. But if you're in the Prospero app, maybe you get an email and you're said like, hey, we just rolled out an ETF. Maybe you want to try it. It's a totally different process than getting fed an ad or being introduced because we've already done a lot to make sure that our users, trust our signals, trust our process. So, I think that that's one of the really exciting things about, what we're building and the long-term revenue potential is, we consider that kind of hand in hand in what we're doing for free right now in that will always this free product will always be a good way to familiarize people with us and get us into a sales funnel. And some people can consider like a sales funnel like kind of a dirty word or anything like that, but we don't consider it that way because we think what we're doing is introducing and earning trust before asking if people want to put their hard-earned dollars with us in something like an ETF. And so yeah, that's for a specific reason. We think people should, we think the finance industry as a whole should be more interested in earning trust before taking people's money.
Amazing thoughts, George. I want to throw it around the panel too. I know we got Omar on here, and Omar, I know you've personally invested as well. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, kind of your conviction and things? I know you're a big user of Prospero, and I'd love to hear any thoughts you might have for George or any questions at all as well.
Yeah, so I've been a user for a little while now, maybe a little over a year. I've started kind of looking at the app every day. Every time I make a trade, just going into the search section, checking out the bull and bear picks that it recommends. And I think this is just a really important theme in general, applying this type of intelligence to investing. I think the way that people are investing is changing rapidly with modern technology, and there's a lot of s- power in just being able to educate people, understand how to play the market, how they can set themselves up for a better future, and using AI to kind of make it easy, make it accessible to your average retail investor. So I took a look at their crowdfund. I joined, it's super easy. You could just do it online. I love sort of the crowdfunding system that they have here, where rather than taking money from an angel investor or a venture capital investor or a private equity investor who's usually looking to just, you know, 10x their money as quickly as they can without really caring too much about the users, without really caring about the product, can we take this and merge this with something else and, show inorganic growth? But here there's definitely an alignment. I love sort of investing in the products I use. That's always been sort of a guiding philosophy for me. This is something that I used every day, so I wanted to join the crowdfund. And yeah, I'm just curious, since you asked if I had any questions, how that crowdfund process works. because I think it's such a great way to fund companies. I think if more companies were funded by their users rather than, venture capitalists or other investors who are looking to get a rapid return, we'd probably have a lot better products. So I think somewhat recently, like in the last decade or so, maybe they approved these crowdfunding rules where now you can sort of d- sell equity this way, even online. It's a pretty amazing system. How exactly does that all work, and is it fairly recent?
Yeah, so what we're doing, that's a great question. What we're doing is a regulation CF crowdfund. And that is relatively new. And what's so cool about that is, as I think, Jordan was kind of alluding to, previously before this, you had to be an accredited investor to make, any investment in a startup. And that could be pretty hard in terms of accreditation. I do believe it's like I don't know exactly, but I do think it's something like at least 250K a year in salary, or like $1 million in assets, or there's like combined household salaries. But obviously that is not only not accessible to a lot of people, but isn't really even a lot of our user base that we want to include. And as I mentioned, including ownership of the company. That's kind of tough. So yeah, like part of this regulation CF was working on a startup system that could kind of go through a lot of the same types of checks that you would go to for a public company, but not making it so onerous that a startup, because there's a lot of startups that do kind of want to go public earlier. That's a strategy, but those can be really really expensive in terms of getting the regulations, the legal, like, we were able to do everything here in terms of, we hired a third party counsel, we hired a third party accounting like firm whose their job it is to, review our books, review all our documents, right? But where it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars for a company, even a small company to go public in terms of, the restrictions. This was probably closer in terms of if you're just looking at the accounting legal cost type things was closer to like $10,000, right? So that's something that we could something that we really could do. But there's a lot of, you could look at our form C in terms of what we filed, what we disclosed, what was checked. So it's just a really cool, I think, as Omar's saying, it's a really cool balance, and this is a great law where people that are coming into the crowd fund can have confidence that third parties reviewed our books, reviewed our legal documents, reviewed our disclosures, risk factors, things like that. So everyday people that want to invest a smaller amount can have confidence that there was diligence checks, but it's not like an onerous amount of checking for us in terms of funds that we would have to put up. That could be ultimately a large percentage of the round just in filings of what we were trying to raise. So it's a really really cool. I love laws like this as they get expanded because they have done some things. We went through a pretty stringent review process. A couple months leading into the crowd fund. That enables us to offer this round to people with as little as 250 dollars. So yeah, I think it's a great system, and I'm good question, Omar.
Yeah, I think this is an amazing law, honestly, and I'm so glad that this is passed. And I hope that we see this really grow as a source of funding for companies. Because, one of the things that I've really been talking about a lot as a retail investor is how the landscape for retail investors has changed so much over the last few decades, especially since Enron and some of the tighter regulatory requirements there. For a small company that's just getting started, if you have to spend a boatload of money, just for the compliance, instead of investing that money into the business itself, it really kind of chokes off your ability to get capital. So, you want to obviously have standards. You want to make sure that it's safe for retail investors, but you also want to make sure, I think, it's proportionate and that smaller companies do let retail investors invest and that they gain access to those companies. You've had Microsoft millionaires, people who bought Microsoft at IPO and, ended up making a lot of money, retail investors who just bought it on the ordinary stock market. And nowadays, you've got companies that are, I mean, you look at Anthropic today, raising privately at a valuation in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And retail investors just don't get access to that. They really get access post IPO at a much later stage. So wish you would see more companies doing this sort of crowdfunding where your average retail investor could actually get a piece of the pie and get access to those much higher returns that you often see when a small startup becomes a medium or larger company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Omar. It's so nice having the opportunity to be able to, again, for such a low barrier to entry too, to be, a little part of the big boy world, right? The big boy investing world here, where it's a whole nother world that us retail investors don't, like you said, we just don't get access to it, right? You gotta be a real big baller to really have any access to this stuff, and that's just not most people, right? So when these do come across our radar, I love to see it, and I'm with you. I really hope this starts happening more because, like you say, I think it makes the company and the foundation of the company so much better when it's funded by the actual users and the people that actually like care about what's going on with whatever it may be, an app or whatever it may be, right? Whatever tool it may be. So, no, just some great thoughts there. I appreciate you popping in. Noah, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to pop in with any thoughts or questions for George here? I know this is definitely a bit of an interesting opportunity, so I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on things as well.
Yeah, I have a call quickly soon, but I wanted to just pop in and say, as cheesy as this sounds, I think the underlying message for Prospero is it's by the people for the people, right? And like if you go back to like way back when in our founding fathers, right? I think like and it's a different time now, right? But I think part of what's super super important is understanding our roots even as a country, right? And I think part of the issue with some of these private placements, which full transparency, I have invested in some of them, and you're right, the minimum buy-in is like 250 grand. That's ridiculous. Is they're gatekeeping some of the best companies on purpose, right? Because they almost want to screw over the average person, which I think is terrible. Um, and so I think the fact that you guys are doing it as a crowdfunding for as little as $250 is like you're sticking to the mission, which is you started as a platform that gives people that don't have normal institutional level analysis the access for it for really, really cheap or if not for free. Right. And so I think I applaud the mission you're doing because I think it's the right way to do it. Right? Like if you look at it objectively, you're giving anybody the opportunity to own equity in a company that's going to do phenomenally well and is doing phenomenally well, and you give them the option to participate. Say, "Oh, I own equity in this startup." Like that's really cool, regardless of how much money you put in. Like I'm 21, right? If I can say, I own equity in one of the best fintech startups, that's cool. Regardless of how much I own is less relevant, right? But it's the principle and the opportunity to do so that is much more meaningful than the dollar amount that one will put into the business. So I just wanted to say from like a fundamental standpoint and like, a capitalistic market, I think this model is really, really interesting. And I'm glad you guys are doing it. And hopefully you can be a leading example of the right way to, interact with your customer base, like what you were saying, Jordan, right? Which is you're doing it for the people that take care of your business and then you're taking care of them by giving them an opportunity to join in without gutting their wallets, right? So I just think it's really cool that you're doing this model because it just is a whole new realm, and you can hopefully be a leader in doing this as setting like a prime example of, hey, we didn't go to Google Ventures and say give us $100 million, right? Or like, what, we're going to raise less money, but it's going to be much more meaningful money, right? Which in the end of the day, in my opinion, matters a lot more than the like raising at $100 billion valuation. Like, who's even going to buy those shares? Like, let's be honest, these people are not going to make money on it. So I think it's much cooler. So that's just my 2 cents.
Those are some great thoughts. No, I appreciate you coming on. George, did you want to touch on anything that Noah said there? Some great
Yeah,
pieces.
I really appreciate his his by the people for the people thing because that's really how we think about it internally. And it's not just that, right? I think that we have started to see trends of, products that I say really are customer first products in terms of the quality. And when I started Prospero, I actually did AI as a service. I've been in AI for 15 years, and I did AI as a service for 8 years before I started Prospero, about 6, 7 years ago. And the thing that really was important to me when I started this was looking around and saying, like, you know what? I think there's like easy products to use, like Robinhood, in terms of how easy it is to manage risk, options, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, their product is making the person the product, right? They're, over 50% of their revenue is still payment for order flow, and that money is and that's really, making institutions their real customer. And I looked around the landscape, and I said, you know what, there isn't really a customer first product that is not just saying customer first, but is actually, thinking about beyond the product, beyond how people use it. Like, are we really orienting ourselves around, the experience, really putting the interests of the people that use the product first. So I think that that's a really, I love that Noah mentioned that, because that's how we think about it. And we really want to actualize that, not just in this raise and how we're thinking about it, but in terms of how anyone experiences the product, whether they invest in the crowdfund or not.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And on a totally unrelated side note, I'm actually going to be in New York City this week, so I'd love to stop by your guys' office if you're available. I know it's like totally unrelated, but I just forgot about that, so that would be
Yeah,
super
yeah.
cool.
Would love to meet. I'll shoot you a DM right now. We can coordinate.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I know it's unrelated, but I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Perfect timing. And then because I'm 100% gonna participate in this, and I think anybody that wants a taste to be a venture capital or a seed investor, this is, I mean, you don't get a better opportunity than doing it for those $250. I mean, I think Jordan, you also raised a good point here, which is, like that's like nothing compared to what the potential opportunity is in the future, but also nothing compared to what some of these gatekeeping private equity firms charge people, right? Like it goes both ways where you're getting to participate in something cool, but you're also doing it in a way that is financially suitable for your needs, right? So like if you have 10,000, you have a lot of money and you want to invest, go ahead. If you only have 250, go ahead, right? It's not like there's a super high barrier to entry, right? Which is Jordan, what you were pointing out, which is like 100 grand. Like that's a lot of money. That is a ton of money, and it's locked up for like 6 years, right? And they slowly eat at the fees, and so which I think is ridiculous personally. But yeah, I think that not to like take over the conversation, but I think those are both really really good points, which is you get to participate in something cool, and you get to do it at an your version of an affordable price. That's a win-win in like every book, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing right there. It's your version of an affordable price right there. Exactly. I know for most people out there, in the audience, you're probably trading with us throughout the day, you're likely spending more than 250 bucks, $300 on, whatever it may be, trading tools, discords, whatever it may be. And I just think for a similar price, you get to invest and actually own equity in a private company. That's something that you're using all the time. I know it. Almost everybody in the audience has Prospero up on their phone throughout the day, right? Looking at stocks, because we all are too. And I just think it's an absolute win-win, right? Then you get access to all the new alerts. So yeah, definitely something y'all should dive into. Again, that link is up top for anybody that wants all the information to just deep dive and say, oh, I just want to spend the next hour or spend, the evening tonight just really deep diving and filling my brain with all the information. You can do that. And George, I know you're open to conversation. Where can people potentially like contact you, George, and get a hold of you if they wanted maybe to talk with you a little more one-on-one and get some questions answered?
Yeah, I mean, I think George at Prospero.ai. You could always email, you can DM the Prospero account. It's like I'm not the only one on there. You might get, if it's a quick answer, you might want to just DM the account, because there's other people looking at it. But yeah, you can always email me, George at Prospero.ai. And yeah, one other thing that I wanted to say is, like, as I was hearing both of you guys talk, I was actually thinking of like a good way that I think to like look at this kind of investment, especially like an early stage, stake like this. Like, I think you can look at it like an option that doesn't expire, right? And obviously, there's risks to options; they could expire worthless. And obviously, there's more just like risk that a company fails, as a startup than it is, another company. But like you're basically getting an indefinite option, without the higher cost of that option on this kind of thing, right? Because if you're looking at something that could 100x, right, like a startup investment like this, that's the hope. We hope we can get that kind of value, maybe even more, maybe even multiples of that. But I think that's a good way to look at it, right? You can only lose what you put in. These things aren't with risk. Any early stage thing isn't without risk. But one of the risks that gets removed is that expiry, right? If you're not like, even if you're buying a leap, on a long-term company, it is going to expire, eventually. But this is an option that doesn't expire. And if it takes us, I hope it doesn't take us, 10 years, to really hit our stride. But that certainly isn't rare, for a startup. And this is hanging out and getting your appreciation, whenever it does, hit. You get the short term, you get the long term. It doesn't expire. And I think that's a really good way to look at this, right? It's similarly that you'd look at an option. You could lose it all, but you could get a significant gain as well.
Yeah, I think that was the best way to explain it for our audience, especially because it's literally what it is, right? Like I'll show up and I'm like, okay, like I have a few private investments, and this is absolutely going to be one of them as well. I know we're figuring that out, George, but I let everybody know, like I am 100% investing in the crowd fund here. So just for everybody, um, but um, but yeah, just really, really solid stuff. I mean, honestly, I just I don't see why I don't see why anybody wouldn't take advantage of just checking out the website and yeah, just deep diving a little bit. Familiarize yourself with this because again, it's not gonna come on our radar every day. And when it does, I like to jump on them. I have a few from the past, and that's exactly what it is. I just kind of lock it up. I've chosen an amount of money that I'm like, okay, I'm okay with this, and I'm okay to risk this. Similar you would to a zero DTE option. You're like, hey, I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit today. I'll throw $100 towards it or whatever, right? Same thing for me. And I just kind of lock these up and forget about them, right? And then one day we'll see if they come to fruition and pay forward, right? But I just think taking shots where you believe there's value is the best thing you can do, and for such low barrier to entry. Of course, we're going to be keeping our eyes out for more of these, like Omar was saying. I would love to see more of these, but yeah, Omar, I'll pass the mic to you. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so you mentioned 100x ROI. Do you see that as a realistic possibility for Prospero, and what product roadmap do you really see getting you there?
Yeah, I'll do the math live for people, right? 100x return on the current $16 million valuation, um, would be 1.6 billion, right? And I think like that is our goal. That's our what I think is kind of like our realistic goal for the business in terms of a stretch goal that I think, especially as we ramp up, the asset management. We just redid our projections, and what we're looking at, in terms of, as I mentioned, with this growth, and I gave our 2026, number, but we actually think we can get to, 13 million, in revenue by full year 2028. So we think that kind of return, and that's really just us, maybe in, um, our first full year of 2028 of having our asset management, whether it be an ETF or a smart portfolio or anything. We're targeting a 2027 start for that business. As I've mentioned, we're looking at also, expanding internationally. These numbers that I'm quoting are really just looking at the domestic business because it's very hard to model internationally, but we think that there's a lot of upside there. So when you start, taking that to, and even, in a larger conclusion, right? At that point, maybe by 2030 we expand internationally, we continue to get the asset management business scaled and everything like that. you know Maybe we can get to, say, 100 million in revenue by 2030, and at that point we're talking about 1.6 billion, as a little more than 10x revenue, which is, we could probably trade at a 1.6 billion dollar valuation at a fraction of that kind of revenue. But we really think we could kind of hockey stick up after we start that asset management business as we look to expand into international markets. But I do think that that's kind of the key, when you start to say, like, hey, how can we get to those numbers? We think in very reasonable growth assumptions, that even in the first year of our asset management business, before we've even scaled it that well, we can get to 13.6 million in annual revenue, and kind of being well on our way to being a unicorn at that point.
George, is there anybody else doing what you're doing with the AI space, with trading and building out an app specifically, and then doing alerts like you are? Is there any competition in your world here?
Well, we say there's like competition in kind of areas of what we're doing, but we don't think that there's true competition, and I'll explain why. Um, on one end, uh, you have kind of the generative AI solutions. And what we've noticed about those is, like, if you go into them and you ask them to compare companies, often what they're giving you is like old, new tech, old data, right? They'll be giving you, PE ratios, maybe if they're very, advanced, free cash flows or things like that. But they're basically just retrieving old information um, in a different way, and combining it differently, right? Um, we obviously have these high value signals. So we have talked about rolling out generative AI, but we believe we've done a much harder part. We're not just retrieving old data, organizing it differently. We've built these higher value signals that when we get into that area, we think are gonna, like, the generative AI products we talked about, like that I mentioned earlier, is on kind of like our 2026 roadmap in terms of, being able to explore our signals, broader data. We already mentioned we're using some LLM stuff in the alerts that we're releasing. Um, so I think that's the big differentiator on the generative AI side right now. Um, then, I think there's a lot of good products that are kind of like, advanced charting, advanced option metrics, everything like that. But I think a lot of them, especially for novices, are A, difficult to learn, or impossible to learn in terms of the time crunch. And B, even if you know them, you have to be on a desktop during the day to use some of it. Or if you're talking about something like dark pool prints, where we integrate in our dark pool um, you know, metric. A, like dark pool prints, there could be a lot of them, and interpreting them can be difficult. But B, they're non-directional, and like we think our signals provide a lot more clarity than that. And you have to, like, a lot of the times, what those kind of products will say is like bullish above this, bearish below this, and then you'll have to watch. It's not as simple as being able to kind of look at our 10 signals, get a checkup on your stock really quickly, don't need a desktop, can figure out if you want to exit, maybe set, limit stops, that kind of thing based on the movement. So that's where I think we're really, really unique, right? We're not, just an AI company that's delivering, old data in a newer format, an easier retrieve format, or one of those companies that has really cool tech, but a steep learning curve, and also a steep, time component to keep up with it and apply it. We think we're really sitting at that sweet spot of like high value and simplicity to use. And I think the other thing that we do that, like, literally no one is doing on either end of those spectrums with our newsletter is teaching people a process around our signals. So we can say, here you have your process, like, that's great. We don't want to interfere with it. If you have a process, by the way, we'd recommend um, integrating this into your process. And like what I always say to people, is that if you integrate it into your process, I don't expect you to come back, because nobody ever has and said, this hasn't made me better. So I encourage you, to try it, see if, checking, especially net option sentiment, before you make a decision, to enter or exit or pick a new idea, where you look at our picks as well, and you compare them side by side to what you're thinking, we kind of promise that you'll improve. But I think that's, right there is the big difference between Prospero and a lot of other products. The way we think about, how easily it could be taught, how easily it could be adopted, and kind of have it fit to people of any skill level, right? A lot of those, kind of, I would say, more expert level things are targeted at people of a certain skill level. And we want to be able to have people, on any skill level, be able to have it help them improve. And that's what we target. And we really target learning and improvement, which is, very different than I think a lot of, you might call it like, magic pill versions that say like, oh, you'll use our service and you'll instantly become an expert. We like to think more realistically than that. Like, no, we don't think anyone can just get, a stock pick or get a signal and instantly become an expert, instantly, beat the market, but what we do promise is saying like, hey, if you use our product, if you learn how it signals and you help it on your learning journey, you will get better. And I think that that's one thing that really differentiates us.
That was a great answer, and I've seen it across the board. Just in and for me personally, I mean, when I most people can't really even read an options chain, George. Like most people are very basic when it comes to trading and investing, right? And so, but the way your signals are, like I've really never had anybody from the audience. I know a lot of you guys in the audience are using the app. I've never seen anybody really come to me and be like, I've used the app for a week now and I still have no idea what the signals are or anything. Like, I've never heard that ever. It's always people like, wow, this is really descriptive. Like, I was able to learn this pretty quickly. I mean, me personally, George, you've heard this 1,000 times, but I mean, when I got on the app, guys, I didn't know what any of the signals were, but within like 30 minutes of me just clicking around, I'm like, oh, I understand what these signals mean. And I have a better understanding of like, okay, I can find some stocks using these signals that are going to give me a better chance right now, right? I still didn't understand everything fully, but within 30 minutes I was able to look at the signals and be like, oh, okay, I know what this net option sentiment is. I know what that's going to mean if this is high on this stock and blah blah blah, right? So yeah, just super user friendly, super easy. Obviously, if you're in the audience, and we've been talking about the crowd fund, but if you haven't tried the app, it's 100% free. Don't even take our word for it. Just go try it. Like literally, go try it. See what the signals are offering. George, you always have some great tips too, just like with using the signals that you've dropped. You're always doing those live streams from the Prospero account as well. So if you're always interested in that from the audience, make sure you guys are following that Prospero account. You guys are dropping a ton of value from there all the time. But real quick, George, I wanted to back it up a little bit and just kind of get your overall thoughts. Like, when this, if your crowdfunding goes successful how you want it, where do you see the company kind of really shifting after the crowdfund? And what, the money raised, what is that really going to do for the company, and what areas are you going to be able to improve? I guess I'm curious more on those specific details.
Yeah, so why I like this question, um, is, there's a lot of companies that, when they're raising capital, they'll basically tell you like, we need to build this, flagship product, or we need to get XYZ, before we can really expand our market or anything like that. But, to us, it was very important to get it in a place, get the product in a place where, we could demonstrate that it works. And, we obviously have these excellent newsletter picks that show that like, yeah, this really works if you learn the system. um, and kind of do what we're doing and use the signals to improve. And then we also have, an app. Like when you started using it, it was V3. We're now in V4. This app was designed by a former creative director at Apple for 7 years, so we have that intuitive, Apple, where we really wanted to get it there, before we wanted to really, spend any, marketing dollars. And yeah, now we also, we have our flagship alerts product that's done. We've done about 3 years of R&D on that, and really made sure that it's well tested, it works. Even as we got this like back testing, we've gone through with potential users and said like, what, how would you like it fed to you? And that's when we optimized it to do this, once a day delivery, of our best idea. So it could actually be, very effective, but also highly usable, and our easiest product to digest. So that's the nice thing. Like, this money is not, we believe our product suite, especially with this alerts launch, it's there to monetize exactly what we need. So a lot of this is going to expanding, marketing, improving, content quality. So we could really just get the word out, teach people how to use our products because we think it's already there. And I think that's reflected in this, conversation where it's just like, yeah, you don't really ever talk to anyone that's got into Prospero and said, this doesn't work for me. This doesn't improve what I'm doing. Like I've literally never heard that. So, we have a product that we could really stand by. There's other releases, right, that I mentioned. We've done some work on our generative AI product. We've done some work on, our web app is designed that we want to roll that out next year as well. So there's a web interface that people can use. That's going to be kind of free with ads. So we're going to use a different model than we use in the app that we think is going to open up, kind of a wider monetization base. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple products that are like, like I mentioned, they're already like, pretty well developed, especially that web app, the back end, the front end's done. There's just basically, doing the dev work on it. So yeah, we get to just put a lot of this money into just getting the word out about Prospero, getting more users, getting more paid users, especially for this kind of new flagship alerts product. So yeah, it's an exciting time, and I love to be able to stand up here and be like, no, I mean, we think our product is there. We just have to tell more people about it.
Agreed. Some great thoughts, George. Hey, Sam, I wanted to get you in the conversation and see if you had any thoughts. I know you came in a little later, but I don't know if you've taken any initiative to maybe invest or at least look into things here on Prospero. I know you've used the app before, but curious if you have any thoughts or questions for George or anything you want to make sure the audience hears.
No, I am an investor in it. I do believe in the product. I like for me, it's kind of a different perspective for my incentive to invest in it. I mean, of course, it's a great platform. I'm not like a huge trader, so I don't use it as actively, but I do use it as one of the tools on my tool belt for doing swing trades, even initiating long-term positions, just when like the stars align and everything. And what I do like is that I don't really get any bugs in the application. Like you can usually tell, and especially it comes to the customer service as well. I mean, obviously we got George here, but you guys are very responsive to everything. You're very active on Twitter, even with the Substack and all those alerts and whatever. I feel like you can kind of tell a lot from those kind of companies, right? And I'm not just like saying it because you're here, George, but you can kind of tell when it comes to software development and when it comes to building an all-around application, how good something is, depending on how much they want to improve it and how much they're listening to their community. That's what actually I'm seeing with Prospero, which is one of the reasons why I'm investing in it. And also because I mean, you got the backing of the Wolf community and a lot of traders that are on here as well. I'm not just saying that because I'm on this panel, but it does warrant having a little bit of investment. For me, my goals are a bit different from the average retail investor. I'm trying to have a wide variety of assets, just trying to build the nest egg for myself, for my future, my kids, and my family, and everything. And Prospero, in my opinion, if it continues to scale at the way it's scaling today, and considering how a lot of applications, a lot of companies, they find it difficult to scale because they have that linear effect or the one-to-one effect when it comes to growing the user base. But then that means you have to grow your employee base or the people who are working and building the application along with that as well. But from what I've seen with Prospero is that it scales just fine. I haven't seen any issues where something doesn't load, where I can't open a certain ticker, whatever it is. One thing though is that I want to ask about is there going to be a desktop application that's going to be available? I mean, I haven't seen it. Maybe it is available and I haven't used it yet, but that's something I'm looking forward to because I have to do a lot of my research on my desktop.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't. First of all, thanks for investing. You were here last time just talking about it. So happy to have you on board as an investor. Excited that coming to this helped you make your decision. And yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I think maybe I wasn't using the right terminology for everybody. Maybe that's more of the technical term. But yeah, we have our web app is fully designed. Um, we were actually going to release it earlier, but like we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin releasing alerts and the web app. So yeah, like, obviously everything that would go in the web app, the back end is good to go and the front end is designed. So it's not really significant in terms of, what we have to do to release it. But the only reason it's like a 2026 instead of like a right after the crowd fund is because we don't want to spread ourselves too thin in the marketing, right? We really want to focus on marketing the alerts as they're released, um, before we start thinking about, hey, let's start telling people about the web app. Let's funnel people there. Let's experiment with different marketing strategies around maybe multiple products, or maybe it's better to keep pushing one, or funneling people to the website and let people find their own way. We'll run through a lot of that. We just want to make sure. We think alerts is going to be by far, it's our easiest to use product. It's our highest value product in terms of what we can charge with it. So that's been our big focus. But yeah, we definitely, web app is one of the most frequently requested things, and we generally want to give people what they ask for. So yeah, that is important to us, and will definitely be out in 2026.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna love that as well. Definitely, that'll be a tab that never gets closed on my computer. I have many of those, and Prospero will be added to the list for sure. But George, I just want to give you a moment to wrap up, real quick too, for the audience. Just a reminder. Obviously, that link is up top. You got all the information there, but there is 58 days left to invest, which is plenty of time to do some due diligence and make your decision on whether or not you want to be a part of something like this, right? But just wanted to just wanted to throw a reminder there. The clock is ticking, but still plenty of time if you want to take a little time and invest. But I always think getting it in earlier is better than later, especially if you're an avid user of the app. But George, you got any final thoughts you want to leave the crew with? I know we'll do another one of these in the future, but anything you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I did want to just mention in terms of like, in terms of what um, people can look for uh, on a on potential benefit of investing sooner rather than later. Like, we'd love to have you, whenever. But we are doing the alerts release this week. We'll be collecting emails to let people in. So yeah, this week will be the last time that you can get in on the first batch. Granted, if you decide to invest next week and you just miss the first batch, we will probably be doing another batch of crowdfund people by the end of September. But that's not guaranteed. It might be another month. It might be towards the end of the crowdfund before we let in our first batch. The only thing I can guarantee is within the next week, we will be collecting those emails. We will be letting people in on the alerts. So if you want to be on the maiden voyage of alerts, that is time sensitive.
Love that. Yeah, well, I know there's plenty of people that want access to those alerts ASAP. So if that's you, get on the website, talk to George, do what you need to do, and get it all figured out so you can be a part of it. But George, I appreciate your time. Omar in the audience, I know you dropped down, but I appreciate you, my man, and Sam. Just a great conversation. I know we'll do another one soon, but just want to tell the audience again, I appreciate all you guys listening, and I'm glad we can put something like this on your guys' radar, because again, it's just not something we're gonna have every day. We got stocks every day, and I love trading stocks. It's our main thing, right? We love it, but there's just nothing better than having some private investments, tucked away, that you're just sitting on and waiting for stuff you believe in to come to fruition, right, and become valuable. So just really good stuff. George, any last pieces real quick?
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing.
Yeah, go
For
for it, for
people,
sure.
people should check out our Substack. If you just search Prospero AI Substack, um, I think that's actually, I saw Dr. Carter in the audience here, who's someone that helps us write our newsletters, and wrote something for my 40th birthday this weekend. I turned 40 this past Sunday, so I'm an old person now.
Oh,
Uh,
happy late birthday.
thank
Let's
you.
go.
Don't
Um,
tell me that's old.
but
I'm just 2 years away.
but yeah, like, check out our most recent newsletter, because I do think, like, I really appreciated what Matt, also known as Dr. Carter, did. He reached out to some other people that work at Prospero, got quotes about me and the company and things like that. So I think for someone considering investing, it always is important to see what the people at the company think of the CEO, because I think management, who's running things, is super important. So yeah, I was really flattered by what people said about me, what got quoted in the letter. So I think that's a good read if you just want to say, like, hey, like, what kind of a leader am I buying into here? I think I couldn't have wished for anyone to say anything better about me than was kind of like recapped in that email.
I love it. Well,
newsletter.
big shout out, Dr. Carter. And yeah, shout out to the whole team. I appreciate everybody and always just phenomenal conversations we have here on Spaces and a great way to start the short week. I know it is a little bit shorter of a week. We had that long weekend, which was beautiful. Gosh, so nice to get away from the charts like that a little bit. We haven't gotten one of those in a minute, so I enjoyed that for sure. But we'll be back bright and early for everybody tomorrow morning. Wednesday, we're already in the middle of the week, and
Dark and
we'll
early.
see. Yeah, dark and early. Sorry, yeah, you're right, dark and early, and we'll see what this market has to offer. I know we got Jolt's job openings happening at 10 a.m. and some other data later in the week, but should be fun. We got some earnings kicking off as well. Nothing too crazy, but I know AVGO is later this week on Thursday, so still some stuff going on. Figma reporting first time tomorrow night. That'll be fun. Some things to look forward to this week, guys. But just a reminder again, check out that link up top for Prospero, and yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow for another great day and see what this market has to offer. Peace out, y'all. Make sure you guys are following all the amazing accounts that joined us for the conversation. By the way, the Prospero account, Sam, Homar's catalog. It's Omar down there. We had the Fulcrum trade, which was Noah that came on. Just show everyone some love, and we'll be back bright and early tomorrow. Peace out.